Welcome to the Eight Figure Entrepreneur. Whether you're an aspiring founder, a scaling entrepreneur, or just a curious learner, this is the podcast that's going to help you stay focused on your journey, provide actionable insights, and provide a global view on what it means to be an entrepreneur. We usually like to dive into the businesses, the systems, and the mindsets of the entrepreneurs that drive their companies and their organizations towards those eight figures. Joining me today is a friend and a mentor, Dr. Sharon Carrick. Sharon, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Awesome. Excellent. It's great to see you. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. Why don't we start our journey where we first met? So it's not going to be linear, but it's linear in my mind. So we'll start with that. When I met you first, and I was your student, and you were leading the Forge Entrepreneurship Center at the University of Louisville. So
yes,
what brought you there?
So in 2000-ish, I had had a company for 20 years prior to that, and I sold that company. It was a technology company that had over 300 full-time staff, and we'll talk about it later. But I was sort of looking for something to do, and since I was a woman in technology for a long time, I asked the university, maybe I could teach one or two classes. I had been a guest speaker for a number of years to the university business school. And I said, that would be great. I would love to teach one of the technology classes. I was traveling back and forth to a beach house that I had bought from the proceeds. I actually had been newly married. I had turned 40, got married, and that's why I had sold the business. It was time, 20 years. So anyway, I started teaching in the CIS, Computer Information Systems program, and the Entrepreneurship program asked if I would do more guest speaking, and then throughout that first year that I was at the university, said, gosh, we'd love for you to teach one of these classes in entrepreneurship and share kind of your do's and don'ts, if you will. And I had become a accredited investor at the time. And so I had learned a little bit more about venture investing and things like that as I was moving forward. So I had the pleasure of having you in class and many other enthusiastic and eager students that wanted to start businesses and learn how to start businesses. And, we all want to say that we know how to do it right or wrong, but it's an evolving process all the time, based on a lot of different environmental factors and personal factors and those kind of things. But that's how I came to the university. It was really my first love is technology. Love technology. And so teaching technology was first, and then teaching some entrepreneurship classes and joining that effort became a very fast passion for me. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, I kind of see your legacy. You're still teaching, by the way. We'll talk about it later. But for that piece of work that you've done, I think your legacy was in setting up sort of an ecosystem for the entrepreneurs who were in Louisville or around the Kentucky area. You taught that program for 14 years?
14 years. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Talk about some of the companies which were launched under your guidance and what was the impact to the community and to the university in return.
Sure. Over the years, we actually created an undergraduate entrepreneurship program as well as the MBA program that you were in through that time. So interesting enough, we kept the cohort for the MBA small, agile, so that we could maneuver them into business plan competitions and different elements. So I'll talk about the ecosystem, then I'll talk about some of those companies, because it certainly wasn't to my own devices. It certainly takes a team of experts and a village to support these things. So the first thing we did was reach out to the community and accounting firms, law firms, banking firms, different organizations that could come together and share their insight in their component of an entrepreneurial startup. And so we started groups in the community that were really just free meetups whereby anybody, students or people in classes or people just out in the community could actually jump into these meetings and these meetups and meet a wide variety of professionals that were embarking or serving the entrepreneurial community. through those efforts, those became very large meetups. We also hosted startup weekends, which is a national and international program. And that brought together, again, a lot of people from the community or throughout the region that were interested in learning about startups or interested in actually investing in startups. So I think some of the more notable ones from my time period, we had a young a young trainer in the horse industry, and I'm here in Kentucky. So, of course, we've got a big industry here. But we had a young horse trainer that had come for the equine program at the University of Louisville. He was from Florida, and he envisioned a way. He's always frustrated to try to pick jockeys for his horses. And so he envisioned a way to mix the actual horses' records of wins and production, if you will, races, times, a history of their injuries and different things like that, with the actual jockeys that would ride different horses, what their actual percentage ratios of wins at what lengths of duration and so on and so forth. And so thus born Jockey Analytics, which was a very cool app years ago. Now it's been years ago. And of course, other industry leaders have taken that over, but at least that was an opportunity to get a snippet into something that was really cutting edge. Along with that, because we're a horse industry, we had another undergrad business team that won a lot of money. I'm going to say probably $30,000 or $40,000, creating on the iPad sort of like a healthcare profile of horses in the industry. Because here in Kentucky, we have one of the largest thoroughbred horse sales called Keeneland Horse Sales, and people from all over the world, Japan, Dubai, England, come for these horse sales. So this undergraduate team actually created a iPad application that looked like a image of a horse, whereby then you could click on different anatomy of the horse to determine not only what the racing record of that horse was, but the lineage, the heritage, and also then we were starting to compile different home remedies for different issues that thoroughbred horses have that could be remedied. And that team also won a lot of money. Now I'll switch over to the MBA because those are more executive level folks that were more interested in actually commercializing and patenting different devices or different processes and things like that. Some of the more notable ones that we've had were actually harvested from other technology transfer units at other universities. And so each university keeps a tool set or toolkit of products and services potentially that researchers have not launched, because a lot of times the researchers are more involved in the depths of the actual research than they are in commoditizing or monetizing their discoveries. One of the most notable ones that we were involved with is a breathalyzer for lung cancer detection. And that particular team went on to win numerous global business competitions and hundreds of thousands of dollars. That device was actually created by scientists, the researchers, and then the MBA team licensed that from them to bring it forth, and it's remained extremely successful and prominent. Another one is a device that actually could measure different types of range of motion for people that were in serious car accidents or different kinds of injuries. But the Polemus device device measured these range of motion against the physical as well as the physical therapy that they were given. It's to track not only progress, but also to identify malingerers, potentially people that had a range of motion that they could actually move and maneuver, but really helpful to help diagnose and treat different types of effects. Along with that, we also had a device and software that actually I was involved in that was patented, and it's called the EYES project, EYES. And this was, my gosh, probably 14 years ago. So you have to think in present time. The EYES device was actually a transparent luminous keyboard that actually fingerprinted you, as well as it did a triangulation of record of how you typed. And so thereby identifying who the person was that was going to an ATM machine by fingerprint and typing mechanism. I licensed that to an MBA team because you'll find that as an entrepreneur at some points in time, if you're not passionate about things, you don't want to drive it home. But that team won over $50,000 and was fortunate to take it that far. Other medical devices that we've been successful in patenting. We had a physician that was in our MBA program and created a device that actually could scope out your not only your breathing, but also it had a device on it with a camera to go down your throat and actually measure the grip or the constraints on your throat, but also to open the airways up. That particular company has been, the patent actually has been bought and sold, I think, 2 or 3 times now over
Okay.
the last probably 8 years. One last one, there was a device, or excuse me, an inoculation for horn flies, which are large flies that penetrate the flesh of cows as they're out in the field. And that does 2 things with the irritation of those flies picking on the flesh for the cows. It stresses the cow out, which makes a less yield of milk. And it also destroys some of the hide. So a lot of times hide is used obviously for leather goods. And so if it's torn up or damaged, it's not worth as much. And that company has been bought and sold, I think, twice in those efforts as well. And again, along the way, I could name a million other different ones that had good starts and maybe were just home businesses for people that they could be just a self-supporting entrepreneur of themselves.
Yeah, it's so refreshing to see some of the categories of the companies that you've spoken about today, at least online. When we talk about entrepreneurship, it's many times limited to either very much blue collar and boomers retiring, so buy their businesses, or very much uh, digital products and the next thing in AI. But when you talk about these real businesses which are solving a lot of real problems, it's really a refreshing take. Also, the time scale matters because we're talking about like 14 years for an entrepreneur in Kentucky or Midwest. You mentioned, so one of the routes was just being in Kentucky, being really familiar with the equine industry. The other route that is very interesting is going through that office of technology transfer and then finding that connect between the entrepreneurs and the scientists. Is that opportunity available for everyone?
Yes, there are actually toolkits that you can Google, and we'll find the links so you can share it with your audience, whereby really anybody can approach a university throughout the world or throughout the
Mhm.
country and really look for, maybe my suggestion would be look for areas that you have some kind of interest. You don't have to be an expert in, but it reminded me of the hornfly one. We had a person on that business plan group that actually was an agricultural specialist in
Mm.
farming and animals. And so while not being a inoculation specialist or medical specialist veterinarian, that person had passion and interest in that farming and agricultural, especially the animals, and that harvested that interest. So to answer your question, yes, you can go out and harvest these patents, and you have to negotiate with the universities for a percentage of leveraging that. But the really exciting news is scientists want to be scientists, and they want to do their what they believe important work to make discoveries. People that are in marketing, finance, and sales, they want to sell and
Mhm.
leverage and manage people and have leadership to build something. And so that's really the quintessential partnership, is to have, again, the business finance piece and then have the passion piece. And when I talk about my story, actually one of my partners was the finance piece, because I was the love of technology piece, enthusiastic about it and pioneering about it and daring about it and loving it. And then one of the other partners just loved to dig into every kind of financial model there was. And so what a great handshake or complementary skills. A lot of times we see, or it's been my experience over the last 20 years of helping entrepreneurs, and I have to say I've probably helped hundreds, literally. Even now, I limit how many I work with now just because I have some other interests that I'm working on within the university, making the university a little more intrapreneurial within the organization
Yeah.
to leverage talent, skills, and products and processes that we have. But I think it's important to note that a lot of times entrepreneurs maybe don't have all of those skill sets.
Something that I learned from one of the classes was, can we talk about the FBRI framework here?
Yeah. Now, scientists at University of Louisville created that. You'll have to remind me. I know I
Fit,
can't remember what the
fit,
acronym.
value, rarity, inimitability.
Very good. It's sort of what we just had a discussion about is I do coin the phrase that I said years ago when I had my company is where there's mystery, there's margin. And what that means is back to the rarity and the imitability is, how rare is it? And back in the olden days for our company, we wanted to connect PCs to mainframes because lots of times in those early days when the PCs were just coming out, people would have a dumb terminal or CRT, they called it, and then they would have their personal computer, but they didn't talk to each other. And so people were, taking one information from one data set, the mainframe, and trying to input it, hand key it into the other. And so our company found, what could we do to figure out how to interweave the mainframe with the PC? And I won't get into the technicalities of it, but we were one of the first 40 years ago to do that. And that gave us the rarity and the imitability because it was very technical, and it took a good partner like Humana Corporation, which is housed and was founded here in Louisville, Kentucky, to allow some young people like us to go tinker a little bit with the interface to the mainframe to try to port data to the PC. So yes, those are two really key important items because we always hear people inventing companies where they say we're the best, but that's okay, we're the best, we can do it the best. Well, I want to know what makes you different, what makes you the best.
Yeah.
And even when you think about your favorite restaurant, well, there's a million restaurants, but what makes that your favorite restaurant? That's the rarity and the imitability, even in that low margin space. And that's the first thing I say to people is, you have to think about, does the financial components work? I mean, it's great to have an invention and think through that process. There used to be a documentary or a TV show. It's been several years ago, but I just loved it for students to watch. And it was about product failure. And it was that, the entrepreneur was so in love with their idea, but nobody wanted to buy it. So there was no return on the investment to produce the actual device or whatever it was. And they would show people go through that life cycle and, what a shame, spend their whole life savings creating a prototype that meant nothing. Nowadays, I tell people, go to your makerspace anywhere in the world. We have makerspaces all over the communities. Build something with a 3D model. Use that 3D model to actually garner interest. And then as you develop the engineering components of the process, so the good idea can then turn into, something that's a viable product from that perspective.
Yeah. So we briefly touched upon the company that you started out with, that you built, MCS. Then we talked about the time at University of Louisville. And then what we didn't talk about is the Bellarmine. You were the dean of the School of Business over there.
Yes.
Before we talk in detail about that, I wanna ask a question. Throughout these years, you've seen cohorts of young, enterprising entrepreneur students coming to you and talking with you. What were some of the top things that made you think that there's a huge possibility that this person is going to succeed, or this person just needs the right kind of guide? So 3 or 4 categories, right? This one's going to hit it out of the park. This one's going to succeed with the right kind of guidance. This person, I don't want to say it out loud, but I don't want to think about it, but there needs to be a miracle.
I love those categorizations, and they're kind of easy for me to parse out. Number one is the people that I think knock it out of the park are the people that are open to listening and understanding and incorporating and leveraging others' ideas and different leadership. They are what we call coachable, but they also, I give them on the other side, they have persistence and a resiliency to move forward and focus on those things. So those are kind of
Okay.
the, if I could categorize three components, is one, listening, open-mindedness, to take that constructive criticism and do something with it, or choose not to, but have a different resiliency and persistence to, again, pivot. We hear, is that a popular word now? But
Yeah.
all these years, that's what we could see, is somebody sitting and absorbing that information as an entrepreneur and saying, hey, yeah, we need to make a move, and I'll say even our company 40 years ago, that's what we did best, is that we were so young and open-minded, but not to the point of losing our vision. And
Mm.
that's where you have to sort of draw the line, the passion of what you want to do, but how you want to do it and how you want to get there is equally as important. And, we were stubborn and arrogant because we were so young, but we also knew that there were elements that had the rarity and the imitability that corporations didn't know how to solve these problems. And so I'll digress for just a moment, but the three elements of our company were: one, we did technical training and certification. We trained between 15,000 and 17,000 students a year because we wanted to share the knowledge. And we always said, we just want to be a little bit ahead on that. Where there's mystery, there's margin. But we
Mm.
were enabling and empowering these corporations to then learn, which made them build trust for us that we were on the cutting edge, forced us to continue to be on the cutting edge. So that
Yeah.
was the training component, which was a very large part of the business. The other was software development, where we developed, we had our own programmers, a whole army of programmers. And at that time, it wasn't popular to be overseas, but we actually had some Russian programmers, a small company in Russia back 40 years ago, that would upload and download at the end of the day, back with the old dial-up modem, different code and things to help us with software development pieces. And then the third part was the integration. We knew
Mm.
these things. So there's the mystery margin piece again, is these things could talk to each other, but then we could learn more and more and more about it, be innovative of how these things talk to each other. So then when the internet hit, literally 18 years into our business, then we could still use that same profile of rarity and imitability. And we came up with some of the first, we were contracted to be one of the software developers for one of the first online banking applications and e-commerce. And some of our team came up with a really cool e-commerce idea, because companies didn't want to spend the kind of money that we needed to develop it, but we had the
Mm.
vision of how that could be developed with a shopping cart. It wasn't called that then. It was just called, purchases. But we decided to put forth proposals to large corporations that were selling products, whereby we would just take 1 to 2% of their proceeds of their online sales,
Mm.
and we made a fortune because it hit so successfully. But the
Yeah.
corporations, they didn't want to fund or pay for the software development, so we partnered with them. And that's part of listening. We listened to them and they said, we don't have the budget for that. And we were like, yikes, well, we can't fund this. So
Mm.
how might we come up with a collaborative solution? And that was the collaborative solution. And fortunately, some of those agreements were in 3 to 5 year contracts. So even when they took off with huge monies on their shopping carts, so after it got more and more out there promoted,
Mm. Mm.
we were still in the game until the contract ended. And then, of course, those companies would take it over from there. But again, it built trust, that they came back
Yeah.
to us and said, what's next? What's next? So that we could be thinking about how else could we leverage things for them.
So 40 years ago, obviously fell into that first category, and you were able to keep your eyes out to the customers. You had your framework.
Yes.
The components of that framework was also you pivoted, and you were persistent, and you were resilient against the changes that came through that time frame. What about the other two categories of people who make it in?
I think too, having a team mentality, again,
Mm.
it's not just about me. I mean, that can be a lifestyle entrepreneur, and that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
great. But
Yeah.
if you want to build a company, you really have to give before you get. Meaning, my partners, we all were in it fair-mindedly. And so even when we brought on key people, we would share of the wealth, and cut them in. Even at times we hired at one point, because we were so young, we were in our young 20s, as the company, after 10 years, I think we had about 100 full-time employees, and we wanted to get to the next step. So we hired an executive from Motorola, an executive from Chiquita Banana, and an executive from Kroger Corporation. Those executives made more when we brought them in with salaries. They made six-figure salaries that were higher than ours as the founders, because we gave really specific goals for them to achieve and outline. And they had already been in the industry. So they were probably 20 years older than us. At that time, we thought they were old. They were like 45, 50. And we brought them in, and they really taught us the ropes of being open-minded. Back to your point, what are those things? Is, again,
Yeah.
open-minded. Also having that team view of things, is knowing that I can't do all and be all, that there's other people that are better than me. And we didn't just say, let's hire people better than we did. We hired them. And we compensated them more than we got, but it paid out tenfold, because they knew so much more than we knew, and they could help us so much more.
Strategic partnerships.
Yes.
Also, what I'm hearing is that it's okay to be a solopreneur. It's okay to have that lifestyle sort of business. But if you want to scale up, then you got to build the systems, and you got to build that network of people, either within the company or outside the company, that can help you achieve your dream.
And I think sometimes, people, I don't say greedy, but maybe they just don't have the personality, or or maybe they're not calibrated to that level of trust, to say, I would approach partnership, let's try a pilot. We used to do that with our clients all the time, even with the shopping cart thing. We said, Company A, I can't say some of the names of the companies, large corporations. Company A, okay, we'll do the development if you'll launch it and promote it. And then we get a residual of 1% to 2%, whatever we negotiate in the contract. But we put it on our back. We gave before we get. And so that philosophy of doing a pilot, and that we learned so much through those pilot programs, and companies that are open-minded and innovative, they're alert to how is business changing and how might we need to change. And that takes a little bit of, I hate to use the word, wherewithal and risk taking. We talk about calibrated risk. I actually teach a class on calibrated risk now, because it's very interesting. You can actually change your risk calibration meter. So some of us come in very conservative and balanced, and previously it was thought that, people are just like that. But what I've learned through research is actually I can change your risk calibration. I'll give you a real quick example that I do.
Yeah.
Is I come into a class, and I have $1 bills, $5 bills, $20 bills, and I have them in envelopes. And basically, I'll ask a question of the audience, the students, and I'll ask them, once they win, if you will, points in an envelope, they choose an envelope. And then it gets narrowed down, because I let them open the envelope. So did they get the most amount of money? Did they get the least amount of money? And how interesting it is, if you get $1 and I say, okay, let's raise the bar. Now I've got a new set of envelopes, and they have 5, 10s, and fees. Now what's your level of risk reward that you're willing to risk? And people will calibrate, and it's in a high 90 percentile. If you got a $10 bill in the middle and you knew the range was going to be all the way to 100, in the high 90%, you're going to trade that $10 in, because there's going to be the potential reward is great, or is greater. The percentages of odds are with. And so that's what we try to teach people, is what are the percentage of odds, not against you, but of opportunity. What's the percentage of odds for opportunity, not for mediocrity.
That's really interesting. So you're teaching in that class is not necessarily to operate at the level of mediocrity, but to understand what the range is,
right? And so
what the reward is, and then calibrate your risk accordingly.
Yes, and so we do the same thing when we build a simple business plan, 2 pages and 1 page of financials. Same thing. I'm calibrating them to the what ifs based on facts. Now let's verify with some customer discovery. So is there, that mystery of margin? Is there a margin of that can make the business survive and thrive? So if you think about it, then creating that profile, that business plan, that simple, what ifs and pro forma, you are actually then calibrating that person to think about hey, I'm feeling more comfortable about the odds because
Mm.
now I have more facts behind the foundation to know that I have a place where I can build this business, or I have partners that are unique that, will pilot and help me move things forward. That's secret sauce in my opinion.
I love it. I love it. All right, let's time jump and come back to this decade or the past 10 years.
Sure.
Sometime at Bellarmine School and back to the University of Louisville. Tell
Sure.
me.
Yeah. So the other university recruited me to be their business school dean. And just from a business, and now, I'm a PhD in academic. I do research on entrepreneurship. I do research on calibrated risk. Those are my areas of research and publication, as well as technology, because I can't leave that out because I do a lot of micro credentialing and cybersecurity and things like that. But so the other university recruited me to help build their business school. Again, it's back to kind of the same old business premise of SWOT analysis. What's our strengths, what's our weaknesses, opportunities, and threats at that new business school that I went to. And I knew and did my homework about the competitors of other universities
Mhm.
in our region, our price, and, met strategically with other people at the new university, their constituents, and we built a new model, which I'm very proud that the team, it's not me, it was a team of people to figure out. And we actually doubled our enrollment for the MBA
Mm.
within 17 months
Oh,
of my
wow.
arrival, which was very exciting. And, it was very exciting to update and bring in um, not just entrepreneurs, but business people that could help partner, again, strategic partnering, to build and grow that business, if you will. And fortunately, it was there. Then the University of Louisville reached back out to me because I had hired their current president's husband. So that was part of my strategy, as I wanted to stay close in alignment. But he and I became very good friends because we taught some similar strategy classes. So I had looked at his CV and reached out to him when they first moved to Kentucky, and we had coffee. And so he elected to come work at a competing university.
Mm.
And so I gave him a Bellarmine shirt instead of a University of Louisville shirt. It was pretty funny, but again, it's building relationships. Still, it was a strategic relationship, and then
Mhm.
through that, then the president, they wanted me back, and they wanted to figure out, how could they? I have a couple of parameters that are personal parameters that I can't have so much bureaucracy on my head, is what I told them to come back. I said, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm still an entrepreneur. I'm all about building and growing and thriving. Myself personally is a trait that I have is
Mhm.
achievement. And you think of locus of control and some of personality traits. I have a very high achievement rate. I told him, I have to be in an environment that doesn't have so many constraints. And a public university has a lot of constraints, whereas my private university I went to, no holds bar. I could invent things, create things. It was so fun. And some worked, some didn't, but it was a playground of
Sure.
innovation and effort. So the University of Louisville then came back with an offer to be an assistant vice president. They had some areas they wanted that aligned with my areas of passion, which is digital literacy. So I created inside the University of Louisville the first ever digital literacy center. And in the first year, and this was actually during the pandemic, fortunately, I'd created an interface with my long-term partners, IBM, Microsoft, Google, where even some of my former employees worked now nationally and globally, where we created an interface and a portal for all of those vendors for their training and free training to reside. So
Mm.
now at the university, so that happened right as soon as the pandemic happened. So we could send out that link to all of our faculty, staff, and students that while we were off, on pandemic, working
Mhm.
at home or shut down or whatever, is they could gain a IBM certificate free for design thinking, which is
Mhm.
not necessarily technology, but it's a
Yeah.
processing. Or they could get a Google Analytics certificate free. So we were really preaching enhance your resume, enhance your credentials. It was one thing when I had my company for 20 years and I'd hire university students and they wouldn't know any technology. I was like, what are they teaching you? And then I learned when I stepped over on the other side is that they were teaching them how to program. It didn't matter what language. So the certificates from the vendors, the tech vendors, was important, but the training and education go hand in hand. I know it's
Mm.
kind of a dicey subject, but anyway, so the university offered me that platform to build and grow. And I'm proud to say now, 4 years later, the Digital Transformation Center has about 14 full-time employees. We have
Okay.
over 20 million in grants. We have what a public university calls, we have a surplus, which means profit. Well, I'm not supposed to say that. In that unit of $1.7 million. And we love it. We are doing new and interesting things. We've just launched a community program where we're training the trainers in the communities, where the trainers in each of the community districts. We train them, we give them all the material, we certify them, we do it all free, and then they use our materials or the Google Analytics materials or the IBM or Microsoft materials to go to their community and train, and then we pay them $500 for their first training, just to incentivize them that you can do it too, and you can bring
Mhm.
this to anywhere in the world. So we just have it in our community right now as a pilot. We've already trained 70 trainers, which means equals that we make them do at least a minimum of 10 people, but that's just one training. We have some of them that now that's going to be their profession, their job. So they can do 100 trainings in a year. And be paid, or they can be a side hustle for them, to be
Mm.
paid. But we thus far have about 70 to 75 that have so that's over almost 1,000 people that have now been trained in our community on using AI and digital footprints of things. So I'm very excited about that program and hope to take it statewide and nationally too.
Absolutely. So I this is kind of like strategic upskilling in with real world data and real world companies providing those upskills and saying that we're going to hire people who have these skills and this is what we're looking towards in the future.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
we've
think
even
there's a
had some companies send their
yeah.
trainers through our training, and people were like, "Oh no, no!" I was like, "Yes, yes, we want everyone to have the opportunity. We want
Mm.
everyone to learn about ChatGPT and AI and how to build a chatbot in 10 minutes."
Yeah.
We have
Yeah.
a video how to build a chatbot in 10 minutes. I mean, it's not that hard. It's just back to the
Yeah.
mystery margin. It seems hard because most people don't know how to do it. I'm using some of the same strategies as I did 40 years ago. As
Yeah.
partnering, strategic partnering, enabling people, empowering people. People want to be the master of their own destiny. So why aren't we handing them the tools? That doesn't affront me. That doesn't make me afraid because I'm thinking of what something else is. I'm moving on to something else.
Yeah. How do you think the field is going to change? So where it was 40 years ago and mystery or margin is where the mystery is was the mantra. And today a lot of it is about leveling the playing field, but there's still going to be some sort of unique sauce that each company or each person brings. How do you think this whole transition happens and what do you see for the next 10 years?
Well, interesting enough, I've been watching just last year and the year before last. I'm thinking about companies that went public in the US. So if you look at that, I mean, historically, it's been 50 to 70 to 80 companies a year. And then
Hmm.
within the last 3 years, it's doubled and tripled actually, like 150 companies. Now, why is
Okay.
that? You have to really think. And it's to your question, I think the change is one, people that get automated more quickly or assimilate to newer technologies
Hmm.
still have some advantage because they're streamlining things. In fact, that's a competitive edge that they have right now is they are streamlining things to let AI do it. So they
Hmm.
can go on to the things that are harder or have the more mystery margin, or they're encouraging, like lots of companies are doing internal competitions. Well, Kaizen's been doing it for years. Excuse me, Toyota's been using Kaizen for years. And what they do is you come up with an idea and then you get a percentage of it for some time period. You develop it entrepreneurially within that company. So I think the
Hmm.
change is going to be a lot of menial tasks, so to speak, are going to be streamlined. They are being streamlined right now. And
Hmm.
so we need to teach people to be better and stronger critical thinkers, so they're thinking above the line, not below the line, so to speak. That's a skill set, really pushing their imagination and their innovation. That's how I think things are going to change. Is how do we capture that? How do I teach people to want to do that? Because
Hmm.
again, some people, again, there's nothing wrong with that. We need steady relators. We need the fold slot A and slot B people. But in the future, we're going to need them to understand and invigorate, if you will,
Yeah.
what the next step, of continuous improvement, if you want to call it that, in their job functions that might be at the elementary level, but what could potentially be next. It's that dare to dream philosophy. I always loved that
Mm.
tagline at University of Louisville. I still use it. They
Yeah.
don't do. I was like, dare to dream, what could it be? And, people should take time out in their corporations to say, let's just spend an hour of what if and yes and what else could we do as a team? Yes, and no crazy idea gets thrown on the cutting room floor until you start to think about how could it be monetized. And we're revitalizing even ideas from 5 and 10 years ago that we didn't think could work. We didn't understand how it could work. Well, that doesn't mean it would never work. It just means
Mm.
we now have an opportunity to make it work in a different way. So I think innovation and imagination are some of the key elements that we need to be thinking about, empowering our employees and partners, how they can work with us.
What do you think should be the barometers of success, aside from the obvious one of here's the revenue and here's the bottom line? What else do you think should be the barometers for a company?
For a company, again, I think wellness, and that's become a big tagline for a lot of organizations. But, what really is wellness? And, what kind of healthy pressures do we put on people? Because when you're under too much pressure, you're not as creative. And that was what I was worried about, going back and forth to universities. That's why I told him, I said, for me to be the best me, you have to
Mm.
trust and understand. Give me goals. That's fine.
Yeah.
I can align with those goals. But I also need some time and some autonomy, if you will, to just think about things. I know that sounds crazy, but I have the best job in the world because I get paid to think.
Yeah.
And I get to think about what are those things that could be most beneficial for our students and community. In the future, and knowing that they have an IBM credential on their resume, or we have nurses going through analytics and they get a Google
Mm.
Analytics, because that's important to know how analytics works. Everybody needs to have it. But anyway, so back to the parameters or barometer of what's success for a company. I think this wellness, needs to be a handshake with profitability, and empowerment is another component that can't just be the talk, it has to be the walk. How am I empowering you to dare to dream, and how can I support that, but also with guidelines that you can understand how to leverage it for your best self or your best advantage. That might inspire you, like the Toyota, the Kaizen. They get a
Mm.
percentage
Yeah.
potentially from that, or universities, excuse me, they spend the time licensing and creating patents. That's an expense on the university, not to the scientists. Well, how can the scientists continue to do what they love and enjoy? So we're building an environment that the
Mm.
scientists love and enjoy, but then we're also partnering them with people that can take it to the next level, and put it out there for the good of all, if you will. Like that lung cancer detection device, that's for the good of all. That's a great thing, but it would have sat on the shelf. The scientists, that's not their area of expertise to do sales and marketing and negotiate contracts. You start talking like that, they're glazed over and they want to get back to the lab. But the
Yeah.
barometers that a company can look at is what's the time element that we're willing. Maybe they once a month you get a creative process half day or something, or a department does a yes and creative innovation session, but that becomes
Mm.
part of the culture. That's just part of what this company does and how this company works. But also that they include incentives so that people aren't saying, oh, that corporation's taking advantage of my great ideas.
Mm.
No, there has to be, again, some kind of mutuality. And that doesn't mean it's 50-50. That means whatever can be tolerated, because educating people on what is actually the profit margin on things is a whole nother discussion, as you know.
Yeah.
People see the selling line item, but they don't understand all the cost behind
Yeah.
that. Might bring that down to actually a losing proposition, not a winning proposition.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. What kind of resources might be available to entrepreneurs who just want to start out at the local levels and understand what other kind of either connectors or inventors exist in their community that they can collaborate with?
In the US, we have venture connectors all over the country. All you have to do is Google whatever city you're in, reach out to them, say, I'd like to come to one of your events, and jump in, and you'll meet not only corporation or entrepreneurs, but you're going to meet corporations that are looking for top talent that can be innovative in their leadership. You're going to find venture investors that are looking for, talent diamonds in the rough that they can nurture and grow. You're going to meet your people that, might be like-minded, that are encouraging you. Even it's lonely out there to be just a single entrepreneur. So that's one thing. And also, there's these startup events by different organizations all over the world, literally all over the world.
Yeah.
And even if you're not thinking about a startup, you just want to learn more about it, jump into one of those.
Yeah.
Again, I just remembered about one that we had a couple of years ago, and the folks, they just jumped in just to see what it was all about, and they joined a company that actually launched an app that recognizes different animals. It prompts you for animals. But also the derivative of that app was, now I've seen this other app that recognizes plants. So you can take a picture of a plant and the app recognizes it, and it tells you, does it need more water, or this, that, and the other, what species, what's ended. So back to the point of, get out in the community, even if it's an online meetup network. Get out and do so. I still do it, even as old as I am. I make myself go to something that maybe I'm not even interested in once a year, because those are going to be people that are different than me, and I don't know anything about them, and I always learn something. So you have to make it a discipline or a habit to make that one baby step to get out of your comfort zone. Rotary is another thing across the country. The Rotarians, you can come as a guest to any Rotarian in any city across the country. Those are all business people. There are entrepreneurs there as well. But again, the networking and the connection, I think, still is a very key component, that are resources in your neighborhood that should be investigated.
Okay. I seriously had not thought about the Rotary Club, so that's interesting to hear that.
Oh gosh, yeah, fascinating people. I mean, a lot of very successful business people, as well as, I'm telling startups to go to that too. I tell people, and you probably heard me say, go to a PMI, a Project Management Institute. It's global as well. Go to one of their meetings. You know what you're going to hear? You're going to hear the cool projects, big projects that people are working on. And it's like, what? I didn't know that's. I went to one recently, and they were talking about GE and their space components that they build, the parts or components and things. I was like, wow, that is. Then I learned that one of the largest exports for Kentucky, I always ask it in my class, people always say, oh, bourbon and horses. No, it's actually space equipment engines, pieces and components. Yeah, that's the largest dollar size export. Who knew? But then you start thinking about, wow, if I was an entrepreneur and those parts and components, or even corporations that are coming, like we have some big things coming in Kentucky with electric battery plants. And I'm thinking, what are the other parts and components? Maybe I could be a small distributor for whatever cable or hooks or connectors that might go on that thing. I don't know. This is the way to start thinking about, where do I find ideas? And again, sometimes they're just right there, and you just go and listen and network.
Yeah. Sharon, this has been, so far, it's been a very resource-rich and information-dense episode, so thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I would love to have you for more episodes in the future. Before we close out, a personal question. What's your one big, hairy, audacious goal for 2025? Something that you're scared about.
Oh, gosh. I started a journey on Pilates. So mine is fitness. But I had broken my ankle, as you know, in my shoulder. So my big goal is to get back and this year beat my last year before my accident of over 100 classes. Because when I feel good, I just have so much more energy. And when I have more energy, I think some people are creative, but we can bring it out in others. And that's what I hope to inspire to do. I don't think you can ever motivate people, but I think I can inspire people to say, why don't you try? So I have kind of two. One's my personal goal, back to that premium fitness in my mind. But the other thing is, I want to be able to inspire people, even in failing businesses. I've started to try to take on some coaching for failing businesses, or when they're at a crossroad to growth, to try to help them feel like they're not alone, and that there are other ideas. It's just a matter of meeting with other people. Again, sometimes I just throw a bunch of ideas and they're like, I didn't even think of that. And I was like, yeah, I'm just trying to show you that just meeting with someone different might get you out of your slump so that you can think more creatively.
Lovely. Do you see an energy shift, and does that give you a high?
100%, because my joy, somebody helped me. So
Yeah.
it's the giving back that I owe. And people back in, 40 years ago were helping us at these major corporations, and they were helping me to have that what if. They were helping me dare to dream when I was like, there's no way Humana's ever going to let us tinker with their mainframe. And they were like, maybe tell us more about how you might do this integration. And then, much to my surprise, they said yes. This first, $1 million contract. Wow, there was only four of us, and wow, how could that be? And that was that dare to dream, like some kind of crazy idea that potentially could work.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love that. It inspires me. It makes me feel like I'm contributing to the good of the whole now as well.
Yeah. Lovely. And we'll definitely talk about that on episode 2. Well, for now,
Okay.
thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, I'll see you soon.